The sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow over the peaceful cities of Earth. But everything was about to change. Far in space, a fleet of alien ships moved through the stars, heading straight for Earth. These aliens came from a planet much older and more advanced than Earth. Their ships were sleek, metallic, and enormous, glowing with bright blue lights. They had traveled across galaxies to reach this planet, and they believed it would be an easy conquest. The aliens, who called themselves the Zorathians, had studied Earth from a distance. They knew humans were not as powerful as they were. The Zorathians had advanced weapons, ships that could destroy mountains, and technology that was thousands of years ahead of anything humans could imagine. They thought the humans would be easy to defeat. After all, humans were still using simple tools like guns, and their most advanced machines were nothing compared to the Zorathians' technology. The Zorathians landed in the middle of a quiet forest, far away from any cities. Their massive ships made no sound as they touched the ground, hovering silently above the Earth. The landing was smooth and precise, a perfect display of their superior technology. The Zorathians stepped out of their ships, tall and strong. They wore shiny suits, their faces hidden behind dark helmets. They had no need to communicate with humans just yet. They were sure the humans would see them as gods, and they expected everyone to bow down and surrender without a fight. They spread out, their weapons ready in their hands, scanning the area. But as they moved through the forest, something strange happened. They didn't see anyone. Not a single human was in sight. At first, the Zorathians were confused. Surely, the humans would have heard their ships landing. Surely, they would have rushed to fight them or run in fear. But nothing. It was too quiet. One of the Zorathians, a leader named Vrex, gave a signal to his team. He ordered them to move deeper into the forest. They advanced, stepping carefully, their eyes scanning the trees. Still, there was no sign of life. The trees were silent. The animals in the forest had run away. Vrex felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. It was almost like the humans were too afraid to come out, but something didn't sit right with him. If the humans were afraid, why weren't they hiding or trying to escape? Suddenly, Vrex heard something. A loud bang echoed through the trees, followed by a rush of movement. He spun around, his hand quickly reaching for his weapon. From the shadows of the forest, a human appeared. He was carrying a large wooden stick, more like a pole than a weapon. The Zorathians laughed. This human was unarmed, and he looked ordinary, just like every other human they had studied from afar. "Is this the best the humans can do?" Vrex said with a laugh, his voice deep and mechanical from the helmet. The human didn't say anything. He just raised the pole and swung it toward Vrex with incredible speed. The pole was sharp at one end, and it hit the ground right in front of Vrex's foot, causing the alien to jump back in shock. "This is impossible," Vrex muttered under his breath. How could a simple human with a stick do this? They had expected the humans to be afraid, to run away. But instead, they were fighting back. The human wasn't just standing there. He was preparing to fight. More humans began to emerge from the shadows, and Vrex's confusion turned to frustration. They all seemed to be armed with simple things, poles, rocks, even broken tree branches. But the way they used them was unlike anything the Zorathians had ever seen. They moved quickly and with purpose, their eyes focused, as if they had been waiting for this moment their entire lives. Vrex stepped forward, ready to use his superior weaponry to defeat the humans. But before he could react, something strange happened. The humans, using the simplest tools, began to work together. One human held a rock, tossing it skillfully like a deadly weapon. Another used a piece of broken metal as a shield. The Zorathians had never seen anything like this. The humans were not afraid, and they were not running. They were fighting back with whatever they could find. The Zorathians fired their weapons, but the humans were too fast. They ducked, dodged, and used their surroundings in ways the aliens never expected. They didn't need fancy technology. They didn't need spaceships or energy weapons. They had something the Zorathians didn't: creativity. As the sun continued to set, Vrex realized this wasn't going to be an easy fight. The humans were far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. They were using the land around them, their skills, and their resourcefulness to fight back. It wasn't just about weapons, it was about survival. The Zorathians had underestimated the humans. And now, they were going to learn that humans were not as weak as they thought. The battle for Earth had just begun. The battle between the humans and the Zorathians had only just begun, but already it was clear that things weren't going as the aliens had planned. The Zorathians stood in the forest, their weapons raised, ready to strike. But the humans weren't running away or hiding. They didn't even look scared. In fact, they looked determined. They were ready for whatever came next, no matter how outmatched they were. Vrex, the alien leader, looked at the humans with confusion. How could they fight back with such simple tools? The pole, the rocks, the broken pieces of metal. These weren't weapons at all. But as he watched the humans move, he felt a strange sense of fear rising in him. They weren't just using the objects. They were using them in ways that seemed impossible. They fought with precision, turning ordinary things into deadly tools. The first wave of humans attacked again. One of them, a tall man with a red bandana, threw a large rock at a Zorathian soldier. The rock hit the alien's shoulder, sending sparks flying from its armor. The Zorathian screamed in pain, but the human didn't stop. He picked up another rock and threw it, this time aiming for the alien's weapon. The Zorathians fired back, but the humans were fast. They ducked behind trees and used the forest to their advantage. The aliens were too slow to keep up with their movements. "What is this?" Vrex muttered to himself. "How are they doing this?" A group of humans suddenly appeared from behind a set of trees, each of them carrying a different object. An old bicycle tire, a shovel, even a large branch from a nearby tree. They moved quickly, almost like a team, surrounding the Zorathians and catching them off guard. The alien soldiers fired their weapons, but it didn't seem to matter. The humans used the land around them, quickly hiding behind rocks and trees, dodging the alien fire with ease. The Zorathians weren't used to fighting like this. They had expected to destroy the humans with their superior technology. But the humans weren't fighting like they were supposed to. One human, a woman with short brown hair, took the bicycle tire and spun it like a giant slingshot, launching rocks and debris at the aliens. She wasn't just throwing them randomly. She aimed carefully, hitting one of the Zorathian ships parked nearby. The ship's shield flickered and sparked from the impact. The Zorathians had thought their technology was invincible, but this was a problem they had never imagined. The humans were not only using their surroundings, but they were also attacking their ships with whatever they could find. Another group of humans appeared from behind a pile of broken-down vehicles. They pulled out large metal poles, bending and shaping them into makeshift spears. The Zorathians tried to shoot, but the humans were too fast. They charged at the aliens, throwing their spears with incredible force. One Zorathian was hit in the chest, knocking it back. The alien stumbled, surprised by the strength of the attack. It wasn't a weapon built for war, but it worked. The humans weren't just using their brains, they were using their hearts, their will to fight. And that was something the Zorathians didn't understand. "Retreat," Vrex ordered. "This is not what we expected." But it was too late. The humans were everywhere. From the trees, from the ground, from buildings they had turned into fortresses. They were attacking with whatever they could grab. One human, a man wearing a torn jacket, wielded a broken metal rod like a sword, slashing through the air with impressive skill. Another man, carrying a backpack, opened it to reveal dozens of bottles filled with strange liquids. He threw them at the Zorathians, the bottles breaking with loud bangs. The liquid inside was sticky, trapping the aliens in place. They couldn't move, and it only made them more vulnerable. As the humans continued to fight back, Vrex realized that they weren't just using objects as weapons. They were using their creativity to win. They were thinking on their feet, using anything at their disposal to create new ways of fighting. The Zorathians had underestimated the humans. They thought their weapons and technology would be enough to win, but the humans didn't care about that. They were resourceful. They were clever. They were turning everything into a weapon, from simple rocks to old vehicles to pieces of their homes. Anything could be used for battle, and the humans were proving it. Vrex felt his confidence begin to slip. The Zorathians had always won their battles by having the best technology and the strongest weapons, but the humans weren't fighting the same way. They didn't need advanced machines. They didn't need energy shields or plasma guns. They had their minds, their determination, and the ability to turn anything around them into something dangerous. "This is not just a battle of strength," Vrex said, his voice shaking with disbelief. "This is a battle of minds, and the humans are winning." The Zorathians were now surrounded. The aliens, who had once seen themselves as the superior force, were starting to lose their grip on the situation. They had made a huge mistake. They had thought the humans were weak, but the humans had shown them something far more dangerous: their creativity. And the Zorathians had no idea how to fight against it. The Zorathians were in chaos. What had started as an easy mission to conquer a weak planet had quickly turned into a nightmare. Vrex, the leader of the alien forces, stood in the middle of the battlefield, trying to make sense of the situation. His soldiers were retreating, their once powerful weapons failing to hold back the humans. Everywhere he looked, the humans were fighting back with incredible creativity, turning anything and everything into weapons. The forest, the rocks, even the dirt beneath their feet, everything was becoming a tool for war. How are they doing this? Vrex muttered to himself, his voice filled with confusion. He had seen many battles, fought against countless enemies, but nothing like this. The humans were supposed to be weak, primitive creatures with no chance against the Zorathian might. But here they were, using their surroundings to their advantage in ways he couldn't understand. He watched as another human threw a large rock, expertly hitting one of his soldiers in the face. The Zorathian screamed in surprise as it fell to the ground, its shield useless against the simple stone. The humans didn't need advanced technology to hurt them. They were using whatever they could find, and somehow it was working. It was maddening. "What is going on?" Vrex shouted to his second-in-command, a tall Zorathian named Zarn. "We've used all our weapons. Why are we still losing?" Zarn, his armor scratched and dented, shook his head in disbelief. "I don't know, Commander. It's like they've learned how to use everything against us. The trees, the ground, their own homes. They turn it all into a weapon. We're not prepared for this." Vrex clenched his fists, trying to think of a plan. He looked around, searching for a weakness, but there was nothing. The humans weren't fighting like an army. They weren't using strict tactics or following any set rules. They were unpredictable. One human would use a broken chair leg as a spear, while another would throw a bottle of gasoline at a Zorathian ship. It was chaos, but it was working. Every time the Zorathians tried to counter the attack, the humans would just come up with something else. The aliens were used to facing armies with organized strategies. They were used to facing advanced weaponry, laser guns, and energy shields. But this was different. The humans didn't follow any pattern. They didn't follow any rules. They just used what was around them to survive, and in doing so, they were winning. Vrex watched as a group of humans surrounded one of the Zorathian warships. They were carrying makeshift bombs, created from nothing more than cans, wire, and bits of scrap metal. They moved quickly, their eyes locked on their target. The aliens tried to fire their weapons, but the humans were already moving, dodging, and hiding. The warship was soon surrounded by explosions, and its engines sparked, throwing the Zorathians into a state of panic. "This is madness," Vrex growled. We are losing to a species that doesn't even have proper weapons. Zarn stepped forward, his voice low. Commander, we've underestimated them. We thought they were weak. But they're clever. They use anything they can find to fight. Anything. Vrex stood still, trying to process what he was hearing. Clever. This was something the Zorathians had never encountered before. In all their battles across the galaxy, they had never faced an enemy that could turn the simplest objects into deadly tools. The Zorathians had come to Earth expecting an easy victory, but instead, they were fighting a war of survival. Vrex's mind raced. He needed to regroup, think of a strategy, but nothing seemed to work. Every time they thought they had the upper hand, the humans found a way to turn the tables. It wasn't just that the humans were resourceful. It was that they were using their creativity in ways that the Zorathians could not predict. How could they fight an enemy who turned everything into a weapon? How could they win against a species who used their brains instead of just brute strength? One of the Zorathians, a younger soldier, tried to fight back by firing a high-powered beam weapon at a group of humans, but they were too fast. They didn't stand still and wait for the aliens to attack. They ran, dodging, jumping behind cover, and using anything they could to block the alien fire. The beam missed its target and hit a tree instead, causing a massive explosion. The tree fell, blocking the aliens' view, and the humans used the moment to launch another surprise attack. They weren't just surviving. They were learning. Vrex's frustration grew. This was supposed to be easy. But now, the humans were everywhere, unpredictable and clever. And the Zorathians were failing to keep up. What's their weakness? Vrex growled, turning to Zarn. We can't keep fighting like this. Zarn lowered his gaze. I don't think we can win this one. Commander, they've adapted to every move we make. They are too smart. Vrex stood frozen for a moment. The realization hit him hard. The humans weren't just fighting. They were outthinking them. The Zorathians had the power to destroy planets, but the humans had something else. They had the ability to turn anything, even the most ordinary object, into something deadly. And that was something the Zorathians had never considered. The battle had reached a point of complete confusion. The Zorathians, once so confident in their advanced weapons and technology, were now being pushed back by a force they didn't understand. The humans, they weren't fighting like soldiers. They weren't even fighting like a proper army. They were using their surroundings, their creativity, and their determination. Every time the Zorathians thought they had control, the humans would turn something ordinary into a weapon and shift the tide once again. Vrex paced back and forth in the command center of his ship, his mind racing. He had never faced anything like this. His soldiers were struggling. They were losing ground. The humans had no real weapons, no technology to speak of, yet they were beating the Zorathians with ease. It made no sense. We need to end this, Vrex said through gritted teeth, his voice low and angry. Now. He turned to Zarn, his second in command, who was monitoring the battlefield from a large screen. Zarn's expression was one of confusion and frustration. Commander, we've tried everything. Our weapons, our ships, nothing is working. These humans, they're everywhere. They keep using the simplest things, rocks, sticks, even old machines, as weapons. We can't stop them. Vrex slammed his fist on the table, his patience wearing thin. We need a new plan. We cannot lose this war to these primitive creatures. Just as he said this, the screen in front of them flickered. At first, it was just a small glitch. But then, a large image appeared on the screen, a massive object moving toward the battlefield. Vrex's eyes widened as he looked at it. What he saw was unlike anything he had ever imagined. That's impossible, Vrex whispered in disbelief. It was a human ship, but not just any human ship. This one was enormous, and it was moving fast. It had the appearance of an old cargo ship, rusted and beaten up, with makeshift metal plates covering parts of it. But it was powerful. Vrex could feel the vibrations from the screen, and his soldiers outside seemed to be noticing it too. Zarn looked at the screen, his voice shaky. "Commander, this ship, it's coming straight toward us." Vrex clenched his fists, unable to take his eyes off the screen. The ship was large, but it wasn't the size that worried him. It was the energy it was giving off. This wasn't an ordinary ship. It was human, but it had something else. Something new, something powerful. "Prepare for battle," Vrex ordered. "This is it. They've pulled out their secret weapon. We will destroy this ship before it reaches us." But even as the Zorathians prepared their weapons, they couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. The human ship continued to move forward, and it was getting closer. With every second, it seemed more and more like a massive force that could change the tide of the entire battle. The ship reached the battlefield, and Vrex watched in shock as it moved into position. The humans were setting something up. They weren't just firing from the ship. They were positioning it in a way that made it clear they had a plan. They had been preparing for this moment, and now it was time to reveal their secret. Suddenly, a loud sound erupted from the ship. The ground shook beneath Vrex's feet as a massive cannon fired from the ship's center. The blast was so powerful that it sent shockwaves through the battlefield, knocking the Zorathians off balance. The cannon fired again, and this time, the blast hit one of the Zorathian ships, causing it to explode in a massive fireball. "No," Vrex shouted. "How could they?" Before he could finish, the human ship fired once more, and this time, the blast hit a group of Zorathian soldiers, sending them flying. The humans were using an old-fashioned cannon, one that was so powerful it could destroy anything in its path. It wasn't advanced technology. It wasn't an energy beam or a laser. It was an old-fashioned cannon, fired from a ship made out of scrap metal, and it was working. Vrex's mind was spinning. He had never thought the humans could do something like this. How could they have built such a weapon? It was primitive, yet it was stronger than anything the Zorathians had expected. They were fighting with their brains, yes, but now they were fighting with power too. "They've outdone us," Zarn whispered. "That ship, it's a monster." Vrex gritted his teeth. "No, we will not lose to them. We will stop this ship, no matter what it takes." He immediately gave the order to target the ship. The Zorathians fired everything they had, blasting the ship with energy beams, missiles, and lasers. But the human ship kept firing back, its cannon roaring with power. Every blast it shot out sent the Zorathians scrambling, their ships now in full retreat. The human ship wasn't just a surprise, it was a message to the Zorathians that the humans would not be defeated. They would not give up, and they would never stop fighting. The Zorathians were stunned. They had expected this battle to be quick and easy, but now they realized the truth. The humans were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting to win. And with the big surprise of their hidden weapon, they had shown the Zorathians that they were not as weak as the aliens had believed. Vrex looked at the screen again, watching the human ship continue to fire. His soldiers were retreating, his plans falling apart, and the humans were winning. For the first time since the invasion began, the Zorathians were feeling fear. The humans had given them a big surprise, and it was a surprise the Zorathians would never forget. The battle was turning against the Zorathians faster than Vrex had ever imagined. His once confident army was now in full retreat, fleeing from the humans and their unexpected power. The air was filled with smoke and the sound of explosions as Zorathian ships fell one by one, torn apart by the blasts from the human ship. Vrex stood on the bridge of his command vessel, staring at the chaos unfolding before him. "Commander, we can't hold out much longer," Zarn called out, his voice shaking with fear. The Zorathians had been able to overwhelm entire planets before, but now, facing the humans, their advanced weapons and tactics seemed useless. Vrex looked at the screen. The human ship, though old and patched together with scrap metal, had proven to be a force beyond their understanding. Its cannon, powerful and relentless, had torn through Zorathian ships, knocking them out of the sky. And now, the Zorathians were on the defensive. The humans were everywhere, fighting with everything they had, turning the simplest tools into deadly weapons. "We need to leave," Vrex muttered. His voice was cold, but inside, he could feel the weight of defeat pressing down on him. The Zorathians had never retreated from a battle like this. They had conquered planets, shattered civilizations, but now they were losing to a race they had once thought inferior. Zarn turned to Vrex, his eyes wide with disbelief. "But, Commander, we cannot just run. We can still fight back. We have more ships, more weapons." Vrex shook his head. "It's over. We cannot win." The humans, they've proven that they are not weak. They are not like the other species we conquered. We underestimated them. He turned to the communication officer. "Send the order. All units, retreat. We are leaving this planet." The officer hesitated but quickly followed orders, sending out the signal to the rest of the Zorathian fleet. All across the battlefield, the Zorathian ships began to retreat, slowly pulling away from the humans and their powerful cannon. The sound of energy weapons firing and explosions grew quieter as the Zorathians made their way back into space. The humans, of course, didn't give up so easily. As the Zorathian ships began to retreat, the human forces surged forward, attacking whatever they could. They were like a swarm of ants, small and relentless. They didn't care about winning the war in one blow. They just kept fighting, never backing down, no matter how many Zorathian ships they faced. One group of humans, armed with nothing more than old rifles and homemade explosives, charged forward toward a retreating Zorathian ship. They ran through the trees, firing at anything that moved, while others set up traps in the path of the retreating aliens. It was chaotic, but it was working. The Zorathians were panicking. Vrex watched the scene unfold on the screen, his hands trembling. He had never seen anything like it. The Zorathians were a proud and powerful race, and yet they were being driven off by a species that had once been nothing more than primitive animals. "Commander," Zarn said, his voice filled with unease. "Are we really retreating? Are we really running from these creatures?" Vrex's eyes narrowed. "We have no choice. Their determination, their creativity, it's unlike anything we've ever faced. We will regroup, find another way to fight. But right now, our only option is to leave." The Zorathian ships continued to retreat, and soon they were out of the atmosphere of the planet. The human forces on the ground stopped their attacks, watching as the aliens pulled back into space. The humans were victorious, but there was no celebration, no cheering. They had won a battle, but they knew that the war was far from over. Vrex stood on the bridge of his ship, staring at the stars outside. The defeat was a bitter one. The Zorathians had been forced to flee for the first time in centuries, their pride shattered by the humans. He could feel the weight of that loss, but more than that, he could feel something else, a sense of determination building inside him. "We will return," Vrex said quietly. "We will not be defeated by these creatures. We will find a way to destroy them." Zarn didn't answer at first. He was staring at the retreating human ships, their lights blinking in the distance. "How?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "How can we defeat them? They turned everything into a weapon. They think in ways we never imagined." Vrex turned sharply, his face hard. "We will adapt. We will find their weakness. They may have won this battle, but the war is far from over." But even as he spoke, Vrex knew something deep inside him. The humans were unlike any enemy the Zorathians had ever faced. They were clever. They were strong. They had shown that they could turn anything into a weapon. And if they could do that, Vrex had no idea what they might do next. The Zorathian fleet continued to retreat, leaving the planet behind. But the humans were not done. They had won this battle. And the Zorathians would never forget the day they were forced to retreat, defeated by a species they had once thought weak. As the Zorathians disappeared into the depths of space, the humans stood tall, watching them go. They knew this was only the beginning. The war wasn't over, but they had sent a clear message. They were ready to fight, and they would never give up. The victory was hard to believe. The humans had driven the mighty Zorathian fleet off their planet. They had fought with nothing more than their wits and whatever tools they could find. For many, it was a moment of triumph. The skies were clear, the alien ships gone, and the humans stood victorious. But for others, there was a feeling of unease, a sense that something wasn't quite right. As the dust began to settle and the smoke from explosions cleared, the soldiers and civilians who had fought so bravely on the ground started to realize the full weight of what had just happened. They had won, yes, but the Zorathians weren't the kind to give up easily. They had retreated, but that didn't mean they wouldn't come back. Commander Hale stood in the command center, staring at the large screen that displayed the empty sky. The humans had won the battle, but Hale wasn't so sure they had won the war. He rubbed his temples, trying to shake the feeling that had been growing inside him since the retreat began. A feeling of dread. "We have to be prepared," Hale said, his voice firm. "The Zorathians will come back. They are not like us. They don't just give up." One of the younger soldiers, Lieutenant Walker, stood beside him, still in shock from the events of the last few hours. "But they were beaten," she said. "We pushed them back. We destroyed their ships. They won't come back. Not after this." Hale turned to her, his face hard with experience. "You think this is over? The Zorathians are not like us. They don't just walk away from defeat. They will regroup, adapt, and come back with more force. We've only won a battle, not the war." The words hit Walker hard. She had been part of the fight, part of the team that had pushed the Zorathians away. She had seen the power of the humans, the way they could use anything around them as a weapon. They had turned the tide. But Hale was right. The Zorathians were ruthless. They wouldn't just accept defeat. Elsewhere, panic was starting to spread among the people. The civilians, who had spent the last few days hiding from the Zorathian invaders, were beginning to feel the weight of what had happened. They had fought with everything they had, but now they wondered, what if the Zorathians came back? What if they were just biding their time, planning their next move? The idea of another attack was terrifying. In the heart of the city, a group of civilians gathered near the town square. They were talking, arguing, trying to make sense of everything. Some wanted to celebrate, believing they were safe now. Others, like Alex, a young father, were afraid. He looked out at the horizon, his eyes filled with worry. "We won, sure," Alex said, his voice shaking. "But how long will this last? What if they come back stronger? What if they bring more ships? We can't fight them again. Not like this." His wife, Lily, grabbed his hand, trying to comfort him. "We'll be okay. We have the weapons now. We have the knowledge. The Zorathians won't just walk over us again." But even Lily could hear the uncertainty in her own voice. She wanted to believe it, wanted to feel safe, but deep down, she knew Alex's fears were valid. The Zorathians had shown no mercy before. They had underestimated humans once, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. Back in the command center, Hale continued to issue orders. The people who had fought so hard were now working together to repair the damage, rebuild what had been destroyed, and prepare for whatever was coming next. It was clear they were not taking this victory for granted. They knew they needed to stay vigilant. "We need to be ready for anything," Hale said, his voice commanding. "We'll strengthen our defenses. We'll fortify every position. No one sleeps until we're sure the Zorathians aren't coming back." But despite the preparation, despite the resolve, Hale couldn't shake the feeling in his chest. Something was wrong. The Zorathians weren't just going to leave. He was sure of it. They had been too confident, too prepared. They had advanced technology, a powerful military force. And they had the drive to conquer. What they had just experienced couldn't possibly be enough to make them give up. Outside, a loud explosion shook the ground. People screamed in panic, and soldiers immediately rushed to their posts. The fear, which had been simmering under the surface, exploded. Could this be the beginning of the next wave of attack? Had the Zorathians returned already? Hale's eyes snapped to the screens, and his heart sank as he saw the telltale signs of incoming ships. They were back. The Zorathians hadn't just retreated, they had regrouped faster than anyone could have imagined. "Get the defenses up," Hale barked. "Alert everyone. This is not a drill. The Zorathians are back." The panic was immediate. People rushed to their positions. Soldiers manned their weapons. Civilians took cover. The sense of fear had returned, stronger than ever. The humans had beaten the Zorathians once, but now they were about to face a new, even greater threat. But amid the panic, there was something else, a burning determination. The humans weren't going to give up. They had proven they could fight back before, and they would do it again. The Zorathians might have returned, but the humans had something they didn't have. The humans had the will to survive. And this time, they would fight harder. The battle for Earth was far from over. The sky above Earth was once again filled with the terrifying hum of Zorathian ships. Their massive forms loomed overhead, blocking out the sun as they descended toward the planet. The humans had barely had time to catch their breath after the last battle. And now the aliens were back. The fear that had begun to settle into the hearts of every soldier and civilian once more flared into life. Would this be the end? Had they fought all this way only to be crushed again? Commander Hale stood at the front of the command center, staring at the screens with a tight jaw. The Zorathians were coming, and this time, they seemed more organized. Their ships had regrouped quickly, and they appeared ready for a second strike. Hale could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was it. If the humans didn't stop the Zorathians now, Earth would fall. The soldiers around him were already preparing. Weapons were being checked, armor adjusted, and battle plans reviewed. There was a sense of urgency in the air, but there was also something else, a determination that had been born out of the humans' victory in the last battle. They had shown the Zorathians that they could fight, and now they were ready to do it again. "We have no choice," Hale said, his voice firm. "We fight. We defend our planet. They may have the ships, but we have the will to win. We won't give up. Not this time." The soldiers nodded in agreement, steeling themselves for what was to come. They knew that this time, the battle would be harder. The Zorathians had learned from their past mistakes, and the humans could no longer rely on surprise to win. But they had something else: creativity, strength, and unity. They had fought with whatever they had before, and they would do it again. As the Zorathian ships landed, the battle began. The air was filled with the deafening sound of weapons fire, the sky lighting up with explosions as both sides clashed in the open fields. But this time, the humans were ready. They weren't just fighting with what they had. They were fighting with everything they had learned from the last battle. They used the terrain to their advantage, hiding behind hills and rocks, setting traps for the Zorathians. At first, the Zorathians didn't seem to notice. They were too focused on the humans' weapons, those makeshift, powerful tools that had caught them off guard before. They fired their energy weapons, aiming at human soldiers who were firing back with rifles and cannons made from scrap metal. The fight was intense, and the humans held their ground, pushing the aliens back. But the Zorathians were no fools. They quickly realized that the humans had grown even more clever. They had adapted, building new weapons, new defenses, and new strategies. The Zorathians began to shift their focus, trying to outsmart the humans. But every time they thought they had an advantage, the humans turned it against them. It was then that the Zorathians encountered something they hadn't expected: humans working together in a way that was impossible for the aliens to fully comprehend. Groups of soldiers, civilians, and engineers had come together, working in unison to launch a new surprise attack. They had taken old Zorathian technology that had been left behind in the first battle and adapted it to their own use. What had once been the enemy's weapon became their own. One of the largest Zorathian ships, which had been hovering above, fired down with a powerful laser, trying to break through the human defenses. But the humans had anticipated this. They had built a giant shield out of scrap metal, reinforced by the materials from the wrecked Zorathian ships. When the laser hit, it bounced off the shield and sent a shockwave back toward the alien ship. The Zorathians were shocked. They had never seen anything like this. How could these primitive creatures have used their own technology against them? How could they have anticipated their every move? The Zorathians had underestimated the humans before, and now they were paying the price. Commander Vrex, leading the Zorathian fleet, watched in disbelief as his forces were pushed back again. His ships were taking hits from every direction. The humans were relentless. They were using everything they had, every piece of scrap, every bit of old technology, and their sheer will to survive. This cannot be, Vrex muttered to himself. His empire had conquered countless planets, defeated countless species, but now they were losing to a race they had once thought weak. Zarn, his second in command, looked at the screens, his face pale. "Commander, we've tried everything. Their defenses are too strong. We can't break through. These humans, they have adapted in ways we never expected." Vrex clenched his fists in frustration. "We cannot retreat again. We cannot let them win." But even as he spoke, the Zorathians were being driven back. They tried to regroup, sending in their most powerful ships, but the humans were already one step ahead. They launched a massive counterattack, firing everything they had at the Zorathians. The Zorathian ships exploded in fireballs, and their once confident soldiers began to flee. Vrex watched as the remaining Zorathian forces pulled back. His pride, his belief in their superiority, was shattered. For the first time in his life, he felt completely defeated. These humans, these simple creatures, had shown him what true strength was. It wasn't in technology or firepower. It was in the will to fight, to adapt, and to never give up. As the Zorathians retreated once more, the humans stood victorious. The battle was over, and this time it felt like a true victory. They had humbled the Zorathians, showing them that no matter how powerful their technology was, the human spirit was stronger. And as the last of the alien ships disappeared into the stars, the humans knew one thing for certain. They had won, and the Zorathians would never forget the humbling of the aliens.